How do you create a simulation like this in Blender? The goal is to simulate a camera falling and being realistically caught by a cloth strap. In Blender, you can't make cloth and rigid bodies interact like this because cloth objects can't stop rigid bodies. To do this, we need two things. The camera body, which will be our rigid body, a low-resolution mesh of the strap, which will be simulated with Tensor-Cloth on top of this low-res mesh, will apply the high-resolution strap elements using a surface deform modifier, and this keeps the simulation light and avoids performance issues. Position all the strap elements and add a surface deform modifier to each one, using the low-resolution mesh as the target. Therefore, once you've added the surface deform, don't forget to click the bind button. You can see that deforming the proxy mesh causes all the other elements to follow now. As you can see, I forgot to click bind, which is why the seams aren't following the deformation. Now let's parent all the strap elements to the low-resolution mesh. This way, moving that one mesh will move all the elements with it. As you can see, I have already created a curve that we will use to position our mesh, move our proxy strap onto the curve, and add a curve modifier. This way, the strap will position itself along it, and all the other elements will follow the deformation. Once we have found the correct position, apply the curve modifier now. Apply all the surface deform modifiers on the strap elements. This will cause us fewer problems later. Before doing so, make sure you have a copy of the strap with the modifiers still on, just in case. Now for each strap element, add a new surface deform modifier again targeting the proxy mesh. As you can see, all the elements are moving as expected and are being deformed correctly. There are two approaches for handling the interaction between the strap and the camera. The first approach is simpler. Set the camera body as a rigid body with convex hull collision shape in the Tensor-Cloth panel. Set it as an anchor. This works very well, but the strap will be attached to the camera with less precise collisions near the attachment points. The second approach is more realistic. We will cover it later. Now the fun part begins. Let's import our scene elements and set them as passive rigid bodies. Now let's see how to set up the simulation using the Tensor-Cloth add-on. Select the strap and set it as the source mesh. Keep the denim preset. It will work fine. In the attached rigid body panel, add the camera body and set the distance. Now let's enable Stitch Preview. This will allow us to see the connections between the strap and the camera. Now, since our proxy mesh is made up of separate elements, we need to hold them together using Stitch Edge and Stitch Proximity. Both are not necessarily needed. You can try them and see for yourself. Set the distance at which the mesh should remain connected to itself. As you can see, the higher the value, the more connections are formed. If you notice connections forming in areas you are not interested in, you can use the Vertex Group option to define exactly which areas should have the seams applied. Now click Convert to RB Mesh. The add-on will do the rest. Wait for it to finish calculating. Then, once it is done, press play. Everything is working correctly. The strap is attached, and the physics are working. As you can see, the camera makes a slight jump. This is because we need to adjust the collision margin on both the camera and our collision objects in the scene. Okay, perfect. Having adjusted the collision margin of the elements, the simulation is now smooth. Now, if you intend to move the strap that already has a simulation, it is always best to delete the simulation from the add-on panel first. Don't worry, when we recalculate it, it will remember all the settings. Once repositioned, click Convert to RB Mesh again. Let's make a few more small adjustments to the scene. If we move other elements in the scene, there's no need to delete the simulation. As I mentioned, we only need to delete the simulation if we move the object that has it. Now we notice a problem, but it is easy to fix. The strap is passing through the attachment hardware. Simply go to the Rigid Body World panel in Blender and increase the substeps, perfram, and solver iterations values. As you can see, everything is now correct. If there is still slight clipping, you can also adjust the collision margin of the attachment hardware, since it is a rigid body. Okay, it's time to talk about the second, more realistic approach on how to make the strap and the camera interact. As you can see with the anchor approach, our strap is attached to the camera and is not free to slide and move. So let's look at the more advanced way to connect these elements. Separate the attachment hardware and the camera body into two distinct rigid bodies. Using the entire camera as a single mesh rigid body would be unstable. Remember to go into the Tensor-Cloth panel and remove the connection to the camera body. We won't need it anymore. And since we have changed the parameters, click Rebuild. Assign convex hull collision shape to the camera body and mesh collision shape to the attachment hardware. Also add a rigid body constraint set to fixed to link the attachment hardware to the camera body. Since I wasn't sure if I had already done a rebuild on our strap, I'll do it again. It works perfectly. Now let's modify the scene to make the camera fall and hang from the strap. Notice how the simulation reacts when we simply tweak the weight values of these objects. This shows you how much control you have over the final result without needing to change anything else in the setup. In this case, you can see that the strap is passing through. Simply increase the collision margin on the attachment hardware and also increase the substeps, perfram, and solver iterations values. Perfect. Everything is working correctly, the strap stays caught, and the ring near the camera slides freely in a realistic way. Now let's move the various elements so that the camera ends up hanging from our hook. Once we see that everything is working perfectly, let's bake the scene. Perfect. Our simulation is ready. Before we finish, let me share some tips to avoid problems. It is always best to return to frame 1 before saving. If you want to change physical parameters, always do it at frame 1 and then click Rebuild. If instead you want to change the position of objects, delete the simulation first, then reposition freely. Tensor-Cloth will remember all the parameters. Finally, if you save and close the file while in a different frame, don't worry on reopening. Just go to frame 1 and click Rebuild as you normally would. The simulation will appear frozen, but after pressing Rebuild, the mesh will be correctly repositioned. That's it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.